Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jane. It's great to be here.
Always good to have you. So today we're diving into an introduction to the Baha'i Faith. And our source text is this powerful but really concise overview. It's titled The Baha'i Faith, an overview, and it was written by Shoghi Effendi.
And for anyone unfamiliar, Shoghi Effendi was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith for what, over 35 years? From 1921 to 1957.
Yeah, exactly. So his words carry a lot of weight. This overview is seen as a foundational, sort of authoritative look at the core principles, the history, which is incredible, and the purpose behind it all.
It's not just like a quick summary. It really distills some complex ideas, theological, historical, into a surprisingly compact form.
It does. And, just reading it casually might not cut it.
No, definitely not. It really needs, a deep dive.
Very likely.
We need to unpack its meaning, look at the symbolism, the imagery woven in there.
Understand the historical context, too.
Crucial. And the purpose behind why it was written.
Yeah.
So our goal today is pretty clear. We want to understand what this text actually describes about the Baha'i Faith.
What it means to be a Baha'i today.
Right. And what this overview might mean for, our broader understanding of global unity. What deeper insights can we, or you, the listener, get from looking into these writings?
Okay. So to really kick this off properly, and like our listener suggested, I think the best way is for me to read sections from the summary overview itself.
Yeah, let's hear the source directly.
We'll take it in chunks, though, so we can kind of stop and unpack as we go. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Let's do it.
All right. So let's start with the very first declaration. It really sets an incredibly ambitious tone right from the start. Here it is. The Baha'i Faith upholds the unity of God, recognizes the unity of his prophets, and inculcates the principle of the oneness and wholeness of the entire human race.
Okay, stop right there for a second. Those first few lines, they really hit us with some profound stuff. Unity of God. Okay, many monotheistic faiths share that.
Right.
But the unity of his prophets, that's where the Baha'i Faith offers something really distinct and honestly pretty radical for its time.
How so? Unity of prophets.
Well, it reframes religious history. Instead of seeing different religions as, competing truths.
Which is often how it feels.
Exactly. It sees them as a single, unfolding curriculum for humanity. Each great prophet, Abraham, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad, and others, is like a divine teacher bringing the next chapter.
Ah, okay. Like progressive lessons.
Precisely. It's called progressive revelation. The idea is that religious truth isn't static. God reveals it progressively through these divine messengers tailored to humanity's needs and capacity at that specific time.
So it connects them all.
Yes. It means every major faith is part of one single grand divine story. Not contradictory, but successive stages of one continuous truth. It unifies them.
That's a fundamentally different way of looking at religious history.
Yeah.
Keep going with the reading. All right. So after unity of God and prophets, it says, it proclaims the necessity and the inevitability of the unification of mankind, asserts that it is gradually approaching, and claims that nothing short of the transmuting Spirit of God working through his chosen mouthpiece in this day can ultimately succeed in bringing it about.
Okay, pause again. So flowing right from the unity of God and prophets is this principle of the oneness and wholeness of the entire human race.
Which you mentioned earlier. And you said it wasn't just a feel-good idea.
Not at all. It's a foundational theological principle. It's rooted in the belief that if one God created all humanity, then we're all fundamentally one family.
Makes sense.
And the practical implications of really believing that are huge. If humanity is one, then any kind of prejudice, racial, religious, national, class, whatever.
It becomes illogical, right?
Yeah.
Not just wrong.
Exactly. Illogical and destructive. It means the well-being of one part of the human family is tied up with the well-being of everyone else.
So it changes how you'd approach everything. Politics, economics.
Everything. It demands building relationships and structures based on universal justice and compassion, not division and competition. You basically see every single person as part of your extended family.
That's a high bar.
It is. And then the text makes that really bold claim you just read.
About the necessity and the inevitability of the unification of mankind.
Yes. And that it's gradually approaching. This isn't just wishful thinking in the Baha'i.
It sounds almost like a divine guarantee.
It kind of is. They see it as an inexorable historical process, part of a divine plan. Humanity's reached a stage of maturity, they believe, where global unification isn't just desirable, it's necessary for survival and progress.
And what about the transmuting Spirit of God and the chosen mouthpiece?
Right. The transmuting Spirit, suggests this profound spiritual force that changes hearts and minds. Like alchemy, turning base metals into gold, it shifts people away from conflict towards unity.
Spiritual transformation.
Exactly. And the chosen mouthpiece in this day, that refers directly to Bahá'u'lláh. He's the central figure we'll discuss more later. The idea is that human efforts alone, politics, treaties, etc., aren't enough.
We've seen those fail often enough.
Precisely. This view suggests that a spiritual transformation, guided by this divine revelation through Bahá'u'lláh, is the essential ingredient for lasting universal peace.
Okay, let's get the last part of this initial section.
Okay.
It continues. It, moreover, enjoins upon its followers the primary duty of an unfettered search after truth, condemns all manner of prejudice and superstition, declares the purpose of religion to be the promotion of amity and concord, proclaims its essential harmony with science, and recognizes it as the foremost agency for the pacification and the orderly progress of human society.
Wow. Okay, so much in there.
Yeah, that unfettered search after truth really stands out. And the essential harmony with science. That sounds incredibly modern. How radical was that back in the mid-19th century, especially coming out of Persia?
Oh, incredibly radical. Revolutionary, even. Think about the context. You often had religious dogma clashing violently with scientific discovery. Blind faith in tradition was common.
Right.
So to promote an unfettered search after truth, meaning you, the individual, are responsible for investigating reality for yourself, free from coercion or just following the crowd, that was huge.
It challenges just accepting what you're told.
Completely. It demands personal conviction based on your own investigation, and then essential harmony with science, equally profound.
So faith and reason aren't enemies.
Not according to this. True religion and true science, they believe, are two paths to understanding the same reality, so they can't ultimately contradict each other, if they seem to.
Then maybe our science is incomplete or our religious understanding is flawed.
Exactly. It's not about keeping them separate, but integrating them for a fuller understanding. It aims to prevent, religious dogmatism on one hand and pure materialism on the other.
And the purpose of religion itself. Promotion of amity and concord, pacification and orderly progress. That sounds very focused on this world, not just the afterlife.
That's a key emphasis. While personal salvation is important, this overview really stresses religion's role in transforming society now.
Making the world better?
Yes. If a religion becomes a source of conflict, division, fanaticism, which, let's face it, has happened throughout history.
Sadly, yes.
Then, from this perspective, it's failed its true purpose. The Baha'i writings actually say elsewhere that if religion causes discord, it's better to have no religion.
Wow, that's strong.
It is. It positions religion not as something passive or withdrawn, but as a dynamic, active force for social improvement, for peace, for order, building a better civilization right here on Earth.
So reflecting on just these opening statements, what really stands out to you? How might these ideas challenge or maybe expand how someone thinks about religion's role today?
For me, Mark, it's the sheer, the audacity and the optimism. It's not just pointing out problems. It's offering this coherent, spiritually driven framework for transforming everything.
Right. It's constructive.
Very. The unity of prophets forces you to reconsider religious exclusivity, the oneness of humanity tied to the inevitability of unification. That's a powerful counter-narrative to all the division we see. It makes you ask, is real peace actually achievable? Maybe even divinely guaranteed.
It's just the perspective.
Totally. It expands religion's role way beyond just personal belief, making it this powerful engine for building a global civilization. It challenges that whole idea that religion has to be divisive or that faith and science are, doomed to fight forever. It's a really proactive vision.
Okay. That sets the stage incredibly well.
Yeah.
Now let's move from that big vision to the more concrete principles. This is where it gets really practical, like a blueprint for building this new world.
Yeah, the actionable stuff.
Exactly. I'll read the next section. It unequivocally maintains the principle of equal rights, opportunities, and privileges for men and women, insists on compulsory education, eliminates extremes of poverty and wealth, abolishes the institution of priesthood, prohibits slavery, asceticism, mendicancy, and monasticism, prescribes monogamy, discourages divorce, emphasizes the necessity of strict obedience to one's government, exalts any work performed in the spirit of service to the level of worship, urges either the creation or the selection of an auxiliary international language, and delineates the outlines of those institutions that must establish and perpetuate the general peace of mankind.
Okay. A lot to unpack there, too.
Definitely. Let's start with that first one. Equal rights, opportunities, and privileges for men and women. Unequivocally. In the mid-19th century, that's stunning.
It really is. Think about it. This wasn't just like a progressive nod. It was declared as a fundamental spiritual imperative. The Baha'i writings use this powerful metaphor. Humanity is like a bird with two wings, one male, one female. The bird can't fly properly until both wings are equally developed.
Wow. So equality isn't just fair, it's necessary for progress.
Exactly. It was prophetic, honestly. Centuries ahead of its time in many parts of the world. It's about unlocking the full potential of all of humanity. And linked right to that.
Compulsory education.
Yes. Universal education is seen as vital, not just for individuals to grow, but for society to advance, for equality to actually happen. You need an educated population for a just society, for people to investigate truth for themselves, participate meaningfully.
It dismantles prejudice, too, presumably.
Right. It lays the groundwork for unity by breaking down ignorance and superstition.
Okay, and then it tackles economic justice.
Right.
Eliminates extremes of poverty and wealth. How's that different from, say, charity or socialism? It sounds like it goes deeper.
It does aim deeper. Charity is obviously encouraged, but it addresses symptoms. Socialism often involves state control or redistribution. The Baha'i approach aims to change the underlying structure to prevent those extremes from developing in the first place. Well, the writings suggest various economic principles, things like profit sharing, fair wages, a just system of taxation, ensuring everyone has access to necessities, inheritance laws that distribute wealth more broadly. It's not about abolishing private property, but creating an economic system infused with spiritual values.
So focused on collective well-being, not just individual gain.
Exactly. Aiming for a system where everyone has dignity and opportunity, preventing those huge gaps that breed resentment and conflict. It asks us to rethink economics through a spiritual lens.
Then there's the abolition of priesthood, slavery, asceticism, mendicancy, and monasticism. We touched on priesthood, but what does getting rid of a clergy really mean for the individual believer?
It's a huge shift. It puts the responsibility for spiritual understanding squarely on the individual. No intermediaries needed between you and God.
So you have to engage directly.
Yes. Read the scriptures, investigate truth for yourself, develop your own connection. It fosters a community where everyone participates rather than, a passive audience listening to a sermon.
Less hierarchy.
Definitely. And potentially less corruption or dogmatism that can sometimes come with a professional clergy. And the other things abolish slavery is obvious, but asceticism, begging, monasticism.
Why those?
They're generally seen as either dehumanizing, spiritually unproductive in the long run, or detaching people from the world when the emphasis is actually on engaging with society and contributing to its betterment through work and family life.
Speaking of family, it mentions monogamy and discouraging divorce. Seems like a strong focus there.
Very much so. The family is considered the fundamental unit, the bedrock of society. Monogamy is the rule for marriage.
And divorce.
It's permitted but strongly discouraged. It's seen as a last resort, usually after a year of patience and attempts at reconciliation. The idea is that strong, stable families are crucial for raising children, passing on values, and creating social cohesion. The spiritual education of kids is a huge emphasis.
Makes sense. The strength of society depends on the strength of its families.
That's the view, yes.
Okay, then these two principles, strict obedience to one's government and exalting any work performed in the spirit of service to the level of worship. How do they connect? One civic, one spiritual.
They connect through that vision of an orderly, progressing society. Obedience to government is seen as essential for social order and stability. Baha'is are meant to be constructive citizens.
Even if it disagree with the government?
Generally, yes, in terms of obeying laws. But that's balanced by conscience and the ultimate loyalty to humanity's unity, which we'll get to. It's not blind obedience.
Okay. And the work is worship part.
Ah, that's truly transformative. It spiritualizes everyday life. Your job, whether you're a doctor, a cleaner, an artist, a coder, if you do it with excellence, integrity, and the intention to serve humanity.
It's considered an act of worship, like prayer.
Exactly. As sacred as prayer, it breaks down that old sacred versus secular divide. It means your daily contribution to society has spiritual value. It motivates people to work with dedication. Your 9 to 5 can be a spiritual path.
That reframes work entirely. Okay, and finally, the global outlook.
Yeah.
An auxiliary international language and institutions that must establish and perpetuate the general peace. Big picture stuff.
Absolutely. The auxiliary language is a practical tool for unity. Imagine everyone speaking their mother tongue plus a universally agreed upon second language.
Communication would be so much easier, less misunderstanding.
Precisely. It fosters connection, breaks down barriers, essential for global citizenship, and the institutions for peace point towards a future system of global governance.
Like a world government.
The writings describe something like a world commonwealth or federation, with global legislative, executive, judicial branches, even a collective security force to prevent war. These are seen as necessary structures to manage an interdependent planet, handle disputes fairly, and ensure peace for all nations. It's a comprehensive plan for planetary unity.
So tying this section together,
Yeah.
how do all these specific principles really create that blueprint for a unified, just world? Which ones strike you as most impactful or maybe surprising?
Well, they create the blueprint because they address everything: spiritual life, social structure, economics, governance. It's holistic. What's impactful is how interconnected they are. For me, that elevation of work to worship is just huge. It changes everything about daily life and purpose.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the most surprising still has to be that absolute insistence on gender equality back in the 1800s. It wasn't just ahead of its time, it was like a message from the future. It shows this deep understanding that humanity needs everyone's full potential unlocked to truly progress. These aren't just suggestions, they're presented as like essential building blocks.
Okay, so this blueprint, this vision, it didn't just appear. It unfolded through the lives of three central figures. Let's get into their stories, which are, frankly, incredibly dramatic.
Yes, the heroic age, as it's called.
Yeah. Right. I'll read the next part introducing the first figure. The Baha'i Faith revolves around three central figures, the first of whom was a youth, a native of Shiraz, named Mirza Ali Muhammad, known as the Bab, Gate, who in May 1844, at the age of 25, advanced the claim of being the herald, who, according to the sacred scriptures of previous dispensations, must needs announce and prepare the way for the advent of one greater than himself, whose mission would be, according to those same scriptures, to inaugurate an era of righteousness and peace, an era that would be hailed as the consummation of all previous dispensations, and initiate a new cycle in the religious history of mankind.
Okay, so Mirza Ali Muhammad, the Bab, meaning the Gate.
25 years old, that's young to make such a claim.
Incredibly young. May 1844, he claimed to be the herald, the one prophesied in past scriptures who would announce and prepare the way for someone greater than himself.
The gate, what's the symbolism there?
Well, a gate is an entrance, right? A threshold, a transition point. He was opening the way to a new spiritual era, a greater reality. His mission was to herald this coming manifestation, who would usher in that age of peace, the fulfillment of past prophecies, and start a whole new cycle in the religious history of mankind.
So he was the announcer, preparing people.
Yes. Awakening humanity, challenging old ways, emphasizing spiritual purity, getting hearts and minds ready for a radical shift, opening the door, essentially.
But his mission wasn't exactly welcomed, was it? Let me read the next part about him. Swift and severe persecution, launched by the organized forces of church and state in his native land, precipitated successively his arrest, his exile to the mountains of Azerbaijan, his imprisonment in the fortresses of Maku and Shirik, and his execution in July 1850 by a firing squad in the public square of Tabriz.
Swift and severe is almost an understatement.
Sounds like it. Church and state against him.
Yeah. The established religious and political powers in 19th century Persia saw him as a massive threat. His message challenged their authority, condemned corruption, called for big societal changes.
Saw it as undermining them.
Completely. The persecution was brutal, not just against him, but his followers, the Babis. Tens of thousands were massacred across Persia.
Tens of thousands.
That's the estimate, yes. His imprisonment in Maku and Shirik, these were remote, harsh, mountain fortresses, total isolation.
And then execution by firing squad. Publicly. In Tabriz.
Yes, July 1850. They thought executing him would crush the movement. But often martyrdom has the opposite effect, doesn't it? It galvanizes people, draws attention.
Like pouring fuel on the fire sometimes.
Exactly. It just highlights the immense courage it took for him to bring that message, knowing the likely cost. It's a pattern we see with messengers challenging the status quo.
Okay, so the Bab prepared the way. Then comes the second figure, Mirza Hussein Ali, known as Bahá'u'lláh, meaning the glory of God.
Right, the one the Bab foretold.
Yeah, the glory of God. That title itself implies something ultimate, doesn't it?
It really does. Let's hear about his journey. It's just as intense.
All right, the text continues. Mirza Hossein Ali, surnamed Bahá'u'lláh, the glory of God, a native of Mazandaran, whose advent the Bab herald and forerunner of Bahá'u'lláh had foretold, was imprisoned in Iran, was banished in 1852 from his native land to Baghdad, and thence to Constantinople and Adrianople, and finally to the prison city of Akka, where he remained incarcerated for no less than 24 years, and in whose neighborhood he passed away in 1892.
Okay, pause there. Bahá'u'lláh, the glory of God. If the Bab was the gate,
Bahá'u'lláh was the one entering through it.
that's the symbolism, yes. The ultimate manifestation for the sage, fulfilling the Bab's mission and prophecies from other faiths about a figure who would unite humanity. His appearance marks the start of that new cycle, bringing the detailed laws and principles for a global civilization.
But his life.
Yeah.
Imprisonment in Iran, then this relentless series of banishments. Baghdad, Constantinople, Adrianople.
Constantly being pushed further away to more hostile places.
And ending up in Akka, a prison city, for 24 years, until his death in 1892. That's a life defined by exile and suffering.
It is. Akka was notorious back then, a penal colony. Desolate, unhealthy. Yet it's from there, from what he called the most great prison, that he revealed the bulk of his teachings.
That's incredible. Let's hear about those writings. Okay, continuing about Bahá'u'lláh. In the course of his banishment, and particularly in Adrianople and Akka, he formulated the laws and ordinances of his dispensation, expounded in over 100 volumes the principles of his faith, proclaimed his message to the kings and rulers of both the East and the West, both Christian and Muslim, addressed the Pope, the Caliph of Islam, the chief magistrates of the republics of the American continent, the entire Christian sacerdotal order, the leaders of Shia and Sunni Islam, and the high priests of the Zoroastrian religion.
Over 100 volumes. From prison and exile.
Yeah, the sheer volume is staggering. What does that signify? This wasn't just philosophy, was it?
No, not at all. It signifies divine law, guidance, the framework for this new dispensation. These writings covered everything: laws for daily life, social principles, mystical works on the soul and God, guidance for building that world civilization. It's presented as a comprehensive body of sacred scripture meant to shape both individual lives and the collective life of humanity.
And he didn't keep it quiet. He proclaimed his message to the world leaders.
Audaciously so. From prison, he wrote letters, known as the tablets, to the kings and rulers, addressed directly to the most powerful people on earth at the time.
The Pope, the Caliph, heads of state in the Americas, religious leaders.
Yes, East and West, Christian, Muslim, Zoroastrian, everyone.
What was the point of that? Writing to kings from a prison cell.
Well, it seems twofold. First, it was a bold, open declaration of his mission, summoning them to recognize his station, heed his call, embrace his faith for the good of the world, a direct challenge to their temporal authority, asserting a higher spiritual authority.
And the second purpose. Let me read the last bit about that. In these writings, he proclaimed his revelation, summoned those whom he addressed to heed his call and espouse his faith, warned them of the consequences of their refusal, and denounced, in some cases, their arrogance and tyranny.
Right. So the second purpose was a warning. He basically held them accountable for the state of the world, for the suffering of their people.
He denounced their arrogance and tyranny.
Yes, and warned them of dire consequences: war, chaos, the collapse of their power, if they ignored the call for unity and justice and clung to their own power. It was an act of incredible courage, considering his circumstances.
Absolutely. It underscores that his message wasn't just for Persia, but for the whole planet.
Exactly. Universal from the start.
Okay, that brings us to the third central figure, Abbas Effendi, known as Abdu'l-Bahá, meaning the servant of Baha.
Baha'u'llah's eldest son.
The title itself, Servant of Baha, sounds so humble, despite his crucial role.
It really conveys that humility and devotion, yes. Let's hear about him.
All right. His eldest son, Abbas Effendi, known as Abdu'l-Bahá, the servant of Baha, appointed by him as his lawful successor and the authorized interpreter of his teachings, who since early childhood had been closely associated with his father and shared his exile and tribulations, remained a prisoner until 1908 when, as a result of the Young Turk Revolution, he was released from his confinement.
Okay, so the key things there: lawful successor and authorized interpreter.
Appointed by Bahá'u'lláh himself. Why is that so significant?
It's absolutely critical for the continuity and unity of the faith. Baha'u'lláh explicitly named Abdu'l-Bahá in his will and testament. This prevents the kind of fragmentation and competing interpretations that have happened in other religions after their founder's death. It establishes a clear line of authority for understanding the teachings.
A built-in mechanism for unity.
Precisely. It's part of what Baha'is call the covenant, Abdu'l-Bahá's role wasn't just to lead, but to be the perfect example of the teachings in action, and to explain and clarify Baha'u'llah's vast writings for a global audience, bridging East and West.
And he shared his father's fate, remaining a prisoner until 1908. That's most of his life spent in exile or prison.
Since early childhood, yes. He experienced all those banishments alongside Baha'u'lláh, but then after his release in 1908...
He didn't exactly retire, did he? Let's continue. Establishing his residence in Haifa, he embarked soon after on his 3-year journey to Egypt, Europe, and North America, in the course of which he expounded before vast audiences the teachings of his father and predicted the approach of that catastrophe that was soon to befall mankind. He returned to his home on the eve of the First World War, in the course of which he was exposed to constant danger, until the liberation of Palestine by the forces under the command of General Allenby, who extended the utmost consideration to him and to the small band of his fellow exiles in Akka and Haifa.
Yeah, no retirement. Straight into this incredible 3-year journey. Egypt, Europe, North America.
After a lifetime of confinement. That's amazing.
It really is. And he wasn't just, sightseeing. He was speaking constantly. Universities, churches, synagogues, peace groups, public meetings, explaining his father's teachings to huge, diverse audiences.
What kind of teachings?
The core principles. Oneness of humanity, racial unity, equality of women and men, harmony of science and religion, the need for world peace. He really brought the faith to widespread attention in the West. People were apparently captivated by his wisdom and presence. He was the living example.
And the text mentions he predicted that catastrophe that was soon to befall mankind, World War I.
Yes. He spoke about the danger of European conflict and the arms race shortly before the war broke out.
Wow. That adds another layer, doesn't it? Foresight.
It does. It underscored the urgency of the message. Unity and global governance weren't just nice ideals. They were desperately needed to prevent disaster. It also served, for believers, as another sign of the divine nature of the revelation. These weren't just philosophical ideas. They were relevant, practical solutions to the world's biggest problems.
So reflecting on these 3 figures, the Bab, Baha'u'lláh, Abdu'l-Bahá, their lives were filled with such sacrifice, such resilience. How do their journeys embody the principles they taught? What does their courage tell us about the message itself?
Well, their lives are the embodiment, aren't they? Their willingness to face persecution, prison, exile, even death for the Bab. It speaks volumes about their absolute conviction in the truth they carried.
They lived it.
Totally. They lived the unfettered search for truth by challenging entrenched dogma. They lived the oneness of humanity by proclaiming a message for everyone, East and West. Their courage against overwhelming power, their persistence in teaching, even from prison. It suggests the power behind their message wasn't just human determination.
Something more.
Believers would say it was divine inspiration, a profound love for humanity, an unshakable faith in its destiny of unity that drove them beyond personal suffering. Their lives show that these principles aren't just abstract ideals. They're lived realities that demand immense sacrifice and commitment.
Okay, so after this heroic age, with these incredible figures, what happens next? How does the faith become an organized, ongoing community? This brings us to the administrative order.
Right, the transition to the formative age.
Let's read about that structure. The passing of Abdu'l-Bahá in 1921 marked the termination of the first and heroic age of the Baha'i Faith and signalized the opening of the formative age, destined to witness the gradual emergence of its administrative order, whose establishment had been foretold by the Bab, whose laws were revealed by Bahá'u'lláh, whose outlines were delineated by Abdu'l-Bahá in his will and testament, and whose foundations are now being laid by the national and local councils, which are elected by the professed adherents of the faith.
Okay, so Abdu'l-Bahá's passing in 1921 is the pivot point, end of the heroic age, start of the formative age.
And this formative age is characterized by the emergence of this administrative order.
Exactly, a system for governing the affairs of the community worldwide.
And the text makes a really strong claim about its origin. Let me read the next part. This administrative order, unlike the systems evolved after the death of the founders of the various religions, is divine in origin, rests securely on the laws, the precepts, the ordinances and institutions which the founder of the faith has himself specifically laid down and unequivocally established, and functions in strict accordance with the interpretations of the authorized interpreters of his holy scriptures.
Divine in origin, that's the key phrase.
Unlike systems that just kind of evolved later in other religions, it says this one was foretold by the Bab, laws revealed by Bahá'u'lláh, outlines delineated by Abdu'l-Bahá. It sounds like a divine constitution almost.
That's a really good analogy, Mark. This is a major point of distinction for Baha'is. They believe the blueprint for their administration wasn't invented by followers after the fact, which often leads to splits and different interpretations.
Right, that happens a lot.
Instead, they believe the founders themselves designed it. The Bab hinted at it, Baha'u'lláh set down the laws in his writings, and Abdu'l-Bahá, in his will, gave the precise structure and appointed its first head, Shoghi Effendi, the author of this overview, as the guardian.
So it built right into the foundational texts.
Exactly. The intention is to safeguard unity, ensure the administration stays true to the original teachings across time and cultures, and prevent the kind of fragmentation seen elsewhere. It's seen as part of that covenant we mentioned.
Okay, so how does it actually work day to day? It mentions elected national and local councils, no clergy, but elected bodies.
Right. It's a global system, but it functions locally too. At the community level, Bahá'ís elect a 9-member local spiritual assembly. No campaigning, no nominations. It's supposed to be a prayerful election based on recognized spiritual qualities and capacity.
And these local bodies handle local affairs.
Yes, guiding the community, promoting the teachings, organizing activities. Then, delegates elected by the believers nationally gather at a convention to elect the National Spiritual Assembly, also 9 members.
And above the national level.
All the national spiritual assemblies around the world periodically elect the members of the Universal House of Justice, the supreme governing body, which is based in Haifa, Israel. Again, 9 members. It's this system of elected councils at local, national, and international levels.
And it functions in strict accordance with the interpretations of the authorized interpreters. Who were they?
That refers specifically to Abdu'l-Bahá and after him, Shoghi Effendi. Their interpretations of Baha'u'llah's writings are considered authoritative and guide how the assemblies apply the laws and principles. It provides that central reference point for understanding.
So it's decentralized through elections, but centralized in terms of interpretation.
That's a good way to put it. It's designed to be adaptable to different cultures, but maintain global unity and fidelity to the source.
This whole idea of a divinely ordained system is really interesting. How is it meant to avoid the usual problems of human institutions? Power struggles, corruption, splits.
Well, several ways, theoretically. First, that belief in its divine origin gives it an authority beyond human whims. Second, the elective principle, without campaigning, aims to put people in positions based on service and character, not ambition.
No clergy means no professional class vying for power or money either.
Right. And there's a huge emphasis on consultation. It's a specific method for group decision-making where everyone shares their views, frankly, but then aims for consensus based on the principles, detaching from personal opinions. It's designed to prevent factions or individuals dominating.
So structure, election method, decision-making process, all designed for unity and integrity.
That's the goal, to keep the focus on applying the teachings and building community guided by the scriptures and interpretations across generations.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What does this whole picture, the principles, the history, the administration mean for what it actually is to be a Baha'i in the world today? What's their identity, their purpose? This last section really spells it out.
Yeah, it defines the character of the faith and its followers.
I'll read this final part. The faith which this order serves, safeguards, and promotes is, it should be noted in this connection, essentially supernatural, supranational, entirely non-political, non-partisan, and diametrically opposed to any policy or school of thought that seeks to exalt any particular race, class, or nation.
Okay, some really defining terms there. Supernatural, acknowledging its spiritual, divine basis.
Right.
Supranational, its vision transcends national boundaries.
And entirely non-political, non-partisan. In today's polarized world, that seems like a very deliberate stance. Why is that so important?
It's fundamental to the goal of uniting everyone. If the faith took political sides, endorsed parties, or specific ideologies, it would immediately create divisions, right? It would alienate people.
True. It couldn't be truly universal.
Exactly. So the focus isn't on gaining political power, but on transforming hearts and minds, promoting principles like unity and justice. Baha'is are encouraged to participate in nonpartisan efforts for social good, but the institution itself stays out of politics.
So it can be a unifying moral force rather than another political faction.
That's the idea. It also guards against the kind of corruption or compromise that can come with political entanglements. And it's diametrically opposed to anything that elevates one group, race, class, nation above others. That reinforces the core oneness principle.
Okay, let's continue with the description. It is free from any form of ecclesiasticism, has neither priesthood nor rituals, and is supported exclusively by voluntary contributions made by its avowed adherents.
We've touched on the lack of priesthood and ecclesiasticism. No rituals is interesting too.
Yeah, what does that mean in practice? How do Baha'is do religion without set rituals?
Well, there are specific prayers. There's a period of fasting, there are laws and observances, but not the kind of complex clergy-led rituals you see in some other traditions. The emphasis is more on the inner spirit of devotion, personal prayer, meditation, reading the holy writings, and putting the teachings into action through service.
More focus on individual connection and action.
Yes, and community life involves gatherings for prayer, study, consultation, and social activities, but generally less formal ceremony. It allows for more flexibility and cultural adaptation, perhaps.
And the funding exclusively by voluntary contributions made by its avowed adherents. Only members can contribute.
That's right. Contributions are only accepted from registered Baha'is. It ensures the faith's independence. It's not reliant on or beholden to outside governments, corporations, or wealthy donors.
Fosters self-reliance and community ownership.
Exactly. Contributing financially is seen as a spiritual responsibility and an act of service, part of building that world community together.
Okay, now this last part feels really crucial for understanding the Baha'i worldview and identity as citizens. Though loyal to their respective governments, though imbued with the love of their own country, and anxious to promote at all times its best interests, the followers of the Baha'i Faith, nevertheless, viewing mankind as one entity and profoundly attached to its vital interests, will not hesitate to subordinate every particular interest, be it personal, regional, or national, to the overriding interests of the generality of mankind.
This is it. The principle of dual loyalty, but with a clear hierarchy.
Loyal to your government, love your country, But
your ultimate allegiance is to humanity as a whole. You view mankind as one entity.
So if there's a conflict between national interest and the interest of all humanity,
the overriding interests of the generality of mankind take precedence. Personal interests, regional interests, even national interests are subordinate to the well-being of the whole human family.
That's a radical concept of citizenship.
It is. It means being a good citizen of your country, obeying laws, contributing positively, but within the larger framework of being a citizen of the world.
And the rationale given seems very logical for today. Let me read the final sentence. Knowing full well that in a world of interdependent peoples and nations, the advantage of the part is best to be reached by the advantage of the whole, and that no lasting result could be achieved by any of the component parts if the general interests of the entity itself are neglected.
Exactly. It's pure logic in an interconnected world. What harms one part eventually harms the whole.
Like climate change, pandemics, economic crises. They don't respect borders.
Precisely. So this view says a nation can't achieve lasting well-being in isolation, or at the expense of others, or by ignoring global problems. True advantage for the part comes from the advantage of the whole.
So it requires thinking globally, even when acting locally.
Yes. Your patriotism, your love for your country is understood within that broader love for humanity. If national policies promote division, injustice, or conflict, a Baha'i perspective would advocate for changes that align with the global good, peace, justice, unity. It's about seeing national borders as administrative lines within one shared human homeland.
So thinking about this for you, the listener, how does this idea of global citizenship, this kind of universal loyalty, resonate, especially in our world today?
It's a profound challenge, isn't it? To conventional ideas of nationalism, it asks you, is your primary identity tied only to your nation, or is there a broader human identity that feels more important now?
For some, subordinating national interests might sound idealistic, maybe even naive or unpatriotic.
It might. But faced with global challenges that require global cooperation, that rationale, the advantage of the part is best reached by the advantage of the whole, feels less idealistic and more, well, pragmatic, essential even.
It pushes you to think about how a deeper sense of global connection might change your own choices, your perspective.
Definitely. How does viewing humanity as one entity impact how you live what you advocate for? It's a big question posed by this overview.
Wow, okay. We've covered a huge amount, unpacking this incredibly dense but rich overview. We started with that unifying vision, one God, one human family, progressive revelation.
Move to those really progressive principles for society equality, education, economic justice, work as worship.
Then journeyed through the truly heroic lives of the Bab, Baha'u'lláh, and Abdu'l-Bahá, who endured so much to bring this message.
And looked at the unique administrative order designed to safeguard unity.
Culminating in what it means to be a Baha'i, a non-political, non-partisan community striving for global unity, embodying that principle of world citizenship.
Yeah, this overview by Shoghi Effendi really does function as more than just an introduction. It's like a manifesto, a blueprint for transformation, both personal and collective.
It packs so much into such a short text.
It really does, and it clearly invites deeper exploration, doesn't it? It makes you think about its implications for how we live, how we organize ourselves, how we relate to each other on this planet.
So final thought then. What does this comprehensive overview suggest about humanity's potential future if these principles were taken seriously? And what does it really take for us as individuals to commit to that unfettered search after truth it talks about?
Well, the potential future suggested is, frankly, transformative. A world finally moving beyond endemic conflict, prejudice, and inequality. A civilization focused on collective well-being, cooperation, and spiritual development. It paints a picture of unprecedented peace and progress if humanity chooses that path.
And the individual commitment, that search for truth.
That's the starting point, isn't it? It demands real intellectual honesty, courage to question assumptions, maybe even deeply held beliefs, a willingness to look beyond our own group, our own nation, and seek universal truths. It means becoming active investigators, active participants in building that better future, starting with ourselves. It's not a passive faith.
A lot to think about there. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, listeners, we genuinely want to hear from you.
Yes, please tell us.
Are there other specific passages, maybe books or concepts from the Baha'i writings that you think would make for another interesting deep dive? Your recommendations really do guide where we go next.
We love getting your ideas and exploring these things together.
And of course, please subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our future explorations.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your curiosity today.
It's been fascinating. Until next time, keep diving deep.